great dramatic finish.
Oh, I'm sure you do, but Mr. Gregson...
Hit it!
Broadway, Broadway, we've missed it so. We're leaving soon and taking June to star her in a show. Bright lights, white
Hello, all you theater lovers, both out and proud and on the DL, and welcome back to Broadway Breakdown, a podcast discussing the history and legacy of American theater's most exclusive address, Broadway. I am your host, Matt Koplik, and you guessed it, this is another review episode. Oh yes, the least famous and most opinionated of all the Broadway podcast hosts. We have 3 reviews we're covering today, 3 plays. We are covering Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman, Giant, as well as Dog Day Afternoon. Although I think the order we're going to do is Giant, Salesman. Sorry, we're going to do Giant, Dog Day, and then Salesman. No, let's do Salesman. No, yeah, let's do Giant, Dog Day, Salesman. Sorry about all that. A little all over the place today. Before we get to all of that, I think I read this at one point. I can't recall. I don't have a memory of this, so if I did, I apologize, everybody. But I was, as I said in a previous episode, because of the way Apple Podcasts works, I don't see reviews that are written outside of the country. So I have to find through back channels how to find those outside reviews. So if I did read this, I apologize for repeating myself, but I just wanted to be sure because I don't think I did, and I want to give this person their due. So please cue The Light in the Piazza Overture. 5 stars, a man in chair with better hair. I've been listening to Broadway Breakdown for years now, but I was especially grateful to the pod this past weekend. I was playing auditions for Legally Blonde and had to sight read several songs from Mean Girls and Heathers. I have a broad knowledge of Broadway rep, but these shows only, quote-unquote, came into my chat, as Matt would say, because of previous episodes of the pod that I had listened to. That familiarity gave me an unexpected confidence as I played the songs. Broadway Breakdown is both funny and informative. Past episodes are a treasure trove of valuable information. Choose a show that you don't know and have a listen. You'll be stupid with love for this podcast. Thank you! That's a Mean Girls reference for those of you who do not know. Thank you so much for that, and once again, guys, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe, and give us a nice 5-star review if you can, or join the Discord channel or the Substack. I'll be doing all of these calls to action at the end of the episode. Oh, and also, by the way, make sure you buy tickets for the May 3rd live show covering the 2025-2026 theater season, including the shows we're talking about today. So we're going to start off with the British import Giant. This is a new play written by Mark Rosenblatt, directed by our beloved Nicholas Heitner, starring John Lithgow, who is a great actor and has said some things in the press lately that have not been fantastic. So I would say sometimes people try to do the both sides argument, and it's not always great. Let's leave it at that. Giant came from the West End, where it won the Olivier for Best Play, as well as Best Actor in a Play. I believe also Best Featured Actor in a Play for Elliot Levy, I believe is how you pronounce his name. And it's a pretty timely piece, I will say. The basic premise, for those of you who don't know, I guess we should say that spoilers abound for all of these reviews, right? We try not to give away too much of the ghost, but you gotta talk about this shit in depth a little bit. So Giant is about the children's book author Roald Dahl. Now, I would imagine anyone listening to this podcast knows who Roald Dahl is, but if the name doesn't sound super familiar, you are absolutely familiar with his works. He penned such classics as Matilda, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, The Witches, The BFG, The Twits, Fantastic Mr. Fox. He, possibly the greatest children's book writer of all time. The play takes place, it's based off a very real event. It takes place right before Dahl is about to publish his latest work, which is The Witches. This is circa 1983. And right before the publication of The Witches, Dahl has independently written a book review for a new book that is extraordinarily anti-Israel, because at this point in time, Israel had been invading and bombing Beirut. This is after Beirut themselves had bombed and infiltrated Israel. So things happen in with Israel all the time, it seems. Again, I told you it was relevant to today's world. But so this book, it was mostly covering the um, intricacies of this war with Israel and Beirut that definitely leans towards anti-Israel. And Dahl wrote an independent book review that was a rave for the book and goes on to talk about the state of Israel and his compassion for uh, the Palestinian people. So, based off of his time there when he was a soldier in World War II. But part of the review then goes on to talk about not just his disdain for the actions of the state of Israel, but then his disdain for the Jewish people as a whole and how he feels that they have turned the tide on their narrative from being the world's number one victims of abuse during World War II and homicide and genocide to being perpetrators of genocide in his eyes. And of course, this review causes major backlash and is really the first brick to lay the foundation of the reputation of Dahl of being an anti-Semite. So the play is right after this has happened, and his publishing house, who he's new to because his old publishing house has rejected him. He claims that he left, but it's a difference of opinion. But his new publishing house has sent their director of sales, who's an American woman named Jessie Stone, as played by Aya Cash. They send her over to his country home, which he's doing construction on, in order to coax him into crafting an apology, whether that's a written statement or having an interview with a reporter, because they do not want this impacting the sales of books, because there are all these independent bookstores in America that have Jewish owners, and they are threatening to boycott selling the book. And so, of course, his publishing house is like, we got to get this done. And at the house is Dahl, Aya Cash as Jessie Stone, Dahl's agent and allegedly close friend Tom, as well as his fiance, soon to be wife, Felicity, and their housekeeper, Hallie. And for the first half hour or so, the play kind of is skirting around the issue. Everyone's being pleasant. Jessie shows up and she's a big fan of Dahl because he is objectively a very good children's book author. And eventually we get to the heat of the issue. And throughout the piece, it becomes a bit of a antagonistic protagonist in the character of Roald Dahl. He pokes at everyone around him because he is so confident that he is right, and he is so disillusioned with how everyone else is dumber than he is and more hypocritical than he is and won't stand for their convictions. But he claims that he's not an anti-Semite. He's anti-Israel, and under the guise of, can't you see these atrocities happening? Why can't you stand for your convictions? And of course, what complicates the matters further is through his own overstepping of boundaries, investigating Aya Cash's character, he discovers that she is Jewish. He talks about how his agent and alleged friend Tom is also Jewish, while he still makes remarks about Jewish people in an umbrella term that is ultimately anti-Semitic, in the same way that when a white Karen talks about the African American community and says those people, right? When she's referring to an incident with one in particular person, or any ethnicity, any race you can think of, when people do an overarching generalization, right? That is ultimately an aggression. That is ultimately prejudice. That is ultimately racism. And the play goes back and forth of who's in the right, who's in the wrong. People are trying to have measured arguments with Dahl about what's going on with Israel right now, what's going on with the Jewish population in general, the rise of anti-Semitism, how words have meaning, and you can have your convictions, but you also have to acknowledge when you've done something poorly or in poor taste, or if you've misworded something. There's a lot of wanting to give Dahl the benefit of the doubt. And he keeps digging his heels in harder and harder and harder about refusing to do an apology. And of course, then it's revealed that Jesse Stone, who is an American, the publishing house have told Dahl that it was so important to them that she meet with him that they flew her over from New York directly in order to talk with him. It turns out she actually had been in London for a while. That's why they had sent her over. She's spoken about her son who had a brain tumor and is in a coma, and she reads to him. And Dahl had a daughter who had died tragically young from, I believe, a brain aneurysm. And when he realizes that Jesse Stone has been in London actually for a while, he questions even if she has a son, and if she does, if he's even in a coma. And he gets aggressively more anti-Semitic by shouting at her. And then that goes under the guise of, well, no, he didn't mean it. He was, in the heat of the moment. And then, spoiler alert, we get to the final scene where everyone's cleared out and Dahl says, I will make a statement. I will do an apology. Let's call up, this reporter that, is asking for clarification, and I will speak with him. And everyone's pleased. Oh, he's going to get because he might get a knighthood, and they will have to revoke it if he's still in hot water. And the play ends with him on the phone with the reporter, and his Australian housemaid, Hallie, is there listening to him, and she goes from curious to cautious to ice cold by the end of the scene before she eventually leaves the room and supposedly leaves the house. Because in this interview, as Dahl explains himself to the reporter, the veil gets slowly drawn, and the words he says go from being anti-Israel, being anti-genocide, to pure and simple anti-Semitism. It's not even about Israel anymore. It's just about the Jewish people and their history and their reputation and the racism against them and the prejudice against them, the stereotypes against them. And supposedly, the words in this final scene to this interviewer are word for word what Dahl said in his quote unquote apology or his clarification. And the play ends with that happening. And I was with my friend who, had heard wonderful things, and he enjoyed it, as did I. But he had said to me, "It makes you kind of wonder what's the point," because he gets away with it all, and he got his knighthood. And I said, "Yeah." And The Witches was a major bestseller and was made into a movie and was remade into a movie. And The Witches has come under its own scrutiny of anti-Semitism, and they talk about it in the play of sort of his comments in his book review about this book that's anti-Israel can draw a parallel to his writings of the witches, of the way he describes them. Everyone take a shot for every time a British author has written the phrase "hooked nose." You have Dahl, you have J.K. Rowling, you have fucking Charles Dickens, who, if you ever read Oliver Twist, the other characters refer to Fagin as Fagin, but Dickens refers to him as the Jew. Anti-Semitism is a tale as old as time. It runs deep in many, many countries. What England does not like to admit to is that they are extraordinarily anti-Semitic and have been for almost as long as anyone can remember. And this play does reckon with that a little bit, or rather say it acknowledges that. Giant is not interested in answers. It is interested in poking the bear. It is interested in questions. It is interested in conversations, which is ultimately what you want plays to do. I think if there's a major critique I would have about it, I have two critiques. One is that it takes a while to really start cooking. It's about 20 to 30 minutes before the play really kind of starts to heat up. It's a lot of table setting that can make your mind wander, and you start to think, oh God, is this going to be a really stuffy British play? But no, it's definitely heats up. Things start to pick up when Aya Cash enters, but they don't really pick up until Lithgow's Dahl asks her if she's Jewish, and then that's when the stove turns on. But so that's the first critique. The second critique is ultimately, for all of the big topics that this show is approaching, it doesn't really tackle it. It intellectually tackles it, but I wouldn't say that it super emotionally tackles it, nor does it go beyond, I would say, like an inch deep. It's very eloquent, it's very intelligent, and it definitely is trying to parse as many different sides as possible, which is again what you want. You don't want to be lectured at, but I do think that it maybe it can get a bit bumpy and a bit sloppy that um with that journey. What saves it ultimately is it is extraordinarily well acted. Uh Lithgow is a phenomenal actor. I would argue, most effective on stage. TV, he's done very well. I mean, anyone who's watched Dexter or Third Rock from the Sun, and he's had some great film roles, World According to Garp, Terms of Endearment, but I think that he works best on stage because he's such a big presence. The name Giant obviously refers is various meanings here. Dahl was also a very tall man like Lithgow is. He was a massive presence in English culture, in the literature world. He's also the opposite of what he wrote. He is not a BFG. He's not a big friendly giant. He's an antagonistic bully. Aya Cash's Jessie Stone even says to him towards the end, as the dust starts to settle from all the chaos, she says, "You're not a man. You're a boy. Today has been the tirades of a little child. It's what ultimately makes you so brilliant at what you do as an artist, as a writer, but it's what makes you flawed and doomed to be flawed forever as a man. This is something that will always be a problem with you, and you should really work on it." And it's great to see Aya Cash's Jessie Stone go toe to toe with Dahl, especially because no one else really will. Uh, Mostly because they all have their own hangups. Tom is Dahl's friend and agent, but also while he does have affection for him, also a lot of his income depends on him, and he really can't afford to lose the relationship. And so when his feet are put to the coals by Dahl, Tom kind of skirts around the issue a lot and tries to say a lot without saying too much, and he gets called out on it. And Felicity, Dahl's fiance, she's a little underwritten, I would argue. She acknowledges the ways in which Dahl won't reflect inward on his own failings, on his own moral failings, and applies them to their history together, but not in a way where he has anything to lose. And I think the reason why that's the case is because in real life, he lost nothing. And I think that the playwright Rosenblatt has a really hard time grappling with what he wants to investigate and what actually happened. Ultimately, like, Dahl either needs to lose something or needs to be proven something, not because we need an overly moral story, but the play ends in a way that's not even dramatically it's not dramatically satisfying, nor is it dramatically eerie, like eerily unsatisfying. It as my friend said, it sort of just kind of ends and makes you go, okay, well then why? And know a few people who've seen it and have hated it because they found it incredibly anti-Semitic. I am not entirely sure I agree with that, and I would, if anyone saw the play and felt that way, please reach out to me on the Discord, on Substack, or even on Instagram, and tell me your thoughts, because I can understand the depiction of blatant anti-Semitism on stage to be disconcerting, to be uncomfortable. As we had said in our Thoroughly Modern Millie episode, and whether you think it applies to Millie or not, you know, to show racism is not being racist. To show anti-Semitism is not being anti-Semitic. To show sexism is not being sexist. There are people who are like this. There are people who say these things and think these things. If you are a good writer and good actors, you throw that person in as a tempest in a teapot and you watch the combustion happen. And when the debris falls away, you ask, okay, what can we rummage from the ruins? I'm not sure if everyone's going to rummage anything from the ruins. I think what some people had said to me was that they felt like anti-Semites would watch this play and feel justified. I don't know how they, well, sorry, no, I know how they can, because anyone can feel justified with how they think, because we've grown to become a quite stubborn, boxed in and tunnel visiony world now, which ultimately is a mirror in the way that Dahl is reflected in this play. We all think we're the smartest. We all think we're the most correct. We all think we've got nothing left to learn. The moment you think you have nothing left to learn is the moment that you're dead, in my opinion. Um, Also, I think truly intelligent people, like the most evolved intelligent people, never think that they're done learning. There's always more that they could learn, which is how a lot of characters in this play feel, anyone but Dahl, that is. And I think the play is at its best when Aya Cash's Jesse Stone really comes head to head with Lithgow's Dahl, and they really kind of go at it. That is when it's at its most compelling. And part of that is because Aya Cash, I think, is a wonderful actress. I've loved her on TV. I saw her in You're the Worst. She played Neil Simon's first wife in Fosse Verdon, which she was a little underused in, but whatever. She's she's such a wonderful actress, and I love her, and I'm so glad she's on stage right now. And I would love to see her be recognized for this. So I guess this is to say, where do we see this sitting in the Tony race? It did get mostly good reviews, a couple of raves. The overwhelming consensus was positive plus. This was not the runaway critical smash that it was in London, but it is doing well at the box office. It is a conversation starter, and it does have a Tony Awards pedigree to its name. Lithgow is a two-time winner. Nick Heitner is a two-time winner. Uh, I think that this is definitely a lock for best play. I don't know if I see it winning. We'll talk more about the Ballisters in a few days, but I think that if any play is an opponent to Liberation, it would be the Ballisters. But again, more on that in another episode. But I do think it's a lock for nomination. I think Heitner is, if not a lock, I think he's a very strong possibility. I see uh, Lithgow, I do think, is a lock for Best Actor, and I think is a very strong chance to win. Aya Cash, I think, is a formidable contender for featured actress in a play. Again, I don't know if she's a lock necessarily. There are far too many options this season, but I would love to see her recognized. I do think she has a shot. Definitely has a shot. Elliot Levy, I also think, has a shot for featured actor in a play. Probably nothing in the tech categories. Crowley is a wonderful set designer. He does his job here, but the set is not um, one that I think really strikes you. There's a bit of forced perspective. There's a color to it all. It's very well laid out. I mean, it could be nominated. We don't have um, a ton of really impressive options. I feel like we've got two or three locks for set, and then it becomes sort of, okay, how are we going to fill this out? And it's a detailed house set, which, the Tonys do love for their plays. But I do think play, actor, and director are the most likely, and then featured actress and actor are very strong possibilities as well. Possibly both, most likely one or the other. And yeah, that's Giant for us. So thank you, Giant. Next up, we're going to talk about Dog Day Afternoon. Oh boy. This is the stage adaptation of the film Dog Day Afternoon, which in turn was adapted from an article, The Boys in the Bank, which was based off of a true story of a man who held up a Chase Bank in Brooklyn in the 1970s so he could collect money for his partner's gender reassignment surgery and made national news. He held up the bank and held everyone inside hostage for not a full 24 hours, I don't think, maybe more like 15, 16. And what made it different beyond just his reasons for doing it were the fact that he was such a charming, gregarious person, and that he had managed to turn a lot of the crowd outside the bank on his side and against the cops who were trying to negotiate the hostage situation. He had connected with many people in the bank who he was holding hostage. And this is also reflected in the film Dog Day Afternoon, starring Al Pacino. Dog Day Afternoon is a classic film. It unfortunately was one of my blind spots before seeing this play. And I actually thought about watching it before I went to go see the stage play. And I ultimately decided that I would hold off. I would see the play and then I would watch the movie afterwards and do some more research afterwards so I could judge the play on its own merits. The play is adapted by Stephen Adley Gurgis, who I think he wrote Between Riverside and Crazy. Am I wrong about that? I'm pretty sure that was his, right? Yeah. He's the Pulitzer winner for Between Riverside and Crazy. It's directed by Rupert Gould, who did Tammy Faye and Patriots, Inc., American Psycho, King Charles, Enron, the works. I I'm sort of split on Rupert Gould. I enjoyed Ink a lot. Uh, King Charles was a good one as well. American Psycho, you can listen more to my opinions on the musical in that episode, that deep dive we did. But I mean, Gould is, for me, visually very arresting, but I don't always feel like he's got a sense of tone. I don't always feel like he is in control of his actors, and I don't ever really feel much from his shows. He's more smart than he is feeling. And ultimately, this production continued to prove that for me. The play stars John Bernthal in the Al Pacino role, and uh, Ebon Moss-Bachrach as the Jim Cazale role, his Al Pacino's accomplice in the holdup. While the movie takes a mixed genre approach to the story, the play takes a full-on comedy approach, which is, for lack of a better term, incorrect. Uh, the movie is not a full drama. It's not a full comedy. It's not a full suspense thriller. It is all three of those things. It is a drama in the sense that it is a very serious thing that happens. It's suspenseful because it's a holdup. The moment you put a gun on screen, it becomes suspenseful. And it's a comedy because ultimately the character of Sonny, which is Al Pacino, John Bernthal, doesn't know what he's doing. He decides to do this robbery at the very last second, like that morning, and he involves two of his friends. And one of them leaves like immediately into the holdup, so it's just him and his friend Sal, and they don't know what they're doing, and they're flying by the seat of their pants. But they also, the robbery itself is representative of their frustration with the system and with the police and with everything that is built to work against them and the people that they love, the injustice of it all. The famous uh, scene in the film is, which is recreated here, is Sonny going outside of the bank to talk with the cops and being fed up with their manipulations and the injustice of it all, and starts pointing to the recent Attica travesty and scandal, which Attica was a prison where that was overcrowded, underfunded, and there was a resistance within the prison from the prisoners, from the inmates, against the guards and the management there, because they were being underfed. They were basically sleeping on top of each other, and there was a revolt to have change, and prisoners were killed because of it. Not because they were being violent. They were systematically killing people, to reduce um, the population, but also to send a message to the rest of the prisoners that that was what was going to happen if they continued to revolt against management. And this came out and was a very big scandal. Unfortunately, did not lead to any kind of prison reform, but this was, a major story. And so Sonny in the film points to this and starts shouting Attica, and everyone in the street starts shouting Attica along with him as a way of uniting and turning against the police. And that, of course, is the Act One closer of Dog Day Afternoon on stage. Having not watched the film after seeing the show, it is relatively faithful. Certain phone calls that are happening off screen in the movie that are just voiceovers are done on stage now, such as Sonny talking to his first wife. That is the twist, I guess you could say, of the piece, and it's a twist in the movie, a twist on stage, is that Sonny keeps saying while he's in the bank, he keeps talking to the police, and one of his demands is, "I want to talk to my wife." And they get his wife on the phone, but it's his first wife, his legal wife. And he says, that's not who I'm talking about. Get me my wife. And they come to realize that Sonny's referring to a person named Leon. Leon and Sonny met uh, in the village, and Leon was a sex worker. And they had a very tumultuous, very violent, very toxic relationship, both in real life and in the film and in the play. The play doesn't really go into all that. The movie acknowledges it a bit more. But Leon, at this time, was in a psychiatric ward, for having taken some pills. And in the play, it's more inferred that Leon did this because they were unhappy with their life and them feeling like a woman trapped in a man's body and not getting the support that they needed. It is revealed in the movie that that wasn't really the case. The case was that much as they loved Sonny, their relationship was so combustible that that Leon could not handle it, and they ultimately tried to take their own life to get away from it. And when they survived, they were sent to a psychiatric ward to kind of um, find security and protection from Sonny. And Sonny went to visit Leon. They speak about ultimately what Leon really needs, which is this gender reassignment surgery, which propels Sonny to do this robbery. And Sonny and Leon have a phone call that is sort of their final goodbye before everything goes to shit at the end of the play. The phone call in the play, like the rest of the play, is played very much for comedy, and Leon in particular is played very much for comedy, sort of like a mixture between Nathan Lane in The Birdcage and Hank Azaria in The Birdcage. Whereas in the film, played by Chris Sarandon, yes, there are affectations to Leon that I think some people might view as a stereotype or a little over the top. But first of all, show me any person in the queer community who's not a little bit over the top or doesn't have some trait about them that you would tie to a stereotype. We all have them in some way, shape, or form. Leon is no different because Leon is one of our community, and that is just the case. The way Chris Sarandon kind of plays Leon is a bit like Linda Belcher from Bob's Burgers, which is they play Leon like a Brooklyn mother. It's just very my nerves, my nerves, my nerves, my nerves, and yeah, it's a little much, but also who's to say that Leon isn't a bit much? Leon can be a woman and still be a bit much. Women can be much. That's equality, baby. We're all a little much sometimes. Right. But in this production, it is so over the top that there's no humanity to the character. There's no humanity to anybody. John Bernthal as Sonny tries to get there, mostly in the second act when everything's falling apart. And God bless him, he works really hard to get there. But he ultimately can't because he is unsupported by the production. Gould has given this the most literal design and staging possible. It's a very impressive design. It's a literal bank set that keeps flipping back and forth in and outside of the bank. But because of this, the transitions from outside to inside, from across the street to on the phone, are these very long, almost cumbersome scene transitions that kill momentum, that kill flow, that kill suspense. And by leaning into the comedic side of the play, all of the heart is just gone. The only person who brings a bit of suspense to the piece is Ebon Moss-Bachrach as Sal, who doesn't have a lot of dialogue, but there's a lot of presence. He tends to just be there a lot, and his presence gives some edge to a show that ultimately does not give much edge. I could go on, but ultimately this production is a wash. You're better off just watching the movie. It's far more well done, and it's far more humanely presented. And any issues you have with the 1970s film, I urge you to remember this is 1975. Think of where we were at that time. Think of where we are now and how people, if this is where we're at now when we're treating the story, for it to be treated better in 1975 tells you a lot about the intention of that production of that film compared to this one. In terms of Tony race stuff, obviously play is out the window. There was talk of this, I feel like, in our very first super early Tony predictions back in February when no one really knew what this was going to be. It was this big wild card because the movie's so good. Oh, the playwright is a Pulitzer winner. Rupert Gould is directing. This could possibly work. And it absolutely does not. I think what it has working for it best is technical categories. I think it is a lock for set design. Could potentially win. It's an impressive set design. I ultimately think that the set design doesn't work because it's so cumbersome, but it is objectively impressive on a scale level. It could get in for lighting and for costumes. It's period 70s costumes. And that's really all I see for it. There was talk early in previews of Jessica Hecht. She plays sort of the head bank teller. She's in charge of all of the women in the bank. There was talk of her being nominated. She does a good job, but ultimately she doesn't have anything to go with. But of course, the same was true when she did Summer 1976 at Manhattan Theater Club, and she got nominated for that. So anything's possible. We do, of course, love Miss Jessica Hecht, and we would love to see her win one day, but this is absolutely not her win. It's probably not her nomination. Not when there's so many other potential nominees out there. I mean, I just spoke of Aya Cash and Giant. She absolutely should be getting in there over Jessica Hecht for this play. Uh, Ebon is going to be deemed featured. He's above the title for this, but he's going to be deemed featured for this play. I don't see it happening. John Bernthal has a chance as a leading actor in a play, especially with Fear of 13 kind of flopping with critics. I have my review coming out in a few days, so you'll hear my thoughts on that. But the reception of Fear of 13 has been such that I think Adrian Brody's Tony chances have severely diminished, which actually pushes John Bernthal up quite a bit. But also we'll see what happens with Alden Emmerich for Becky Shaw. The review for that will be coming out in a few days as well. Although I guess I'll say this, and I'll repeat myself in the actual review. Having now seen Becky Shaw, I don't see how Alden can be deemed featured. He is the lead of that show. Just objectively is the lead. In the same way that Anika Noni Rose, for me, is objectively the lead of the Ballisters. They are ensemble pieces, but their stories are the main drive of the show, and they are who we start with, and they are who we end with. Same thing with John Bernthal. We start with him, we end with him. It is ultimately his story that drives the production. And he's doing his best. He is such a talented actor. He's also hot as fuck, but he's undermined left and right by the show he's in. And it's a shame because I think with a better intended production, he could be really great in this. He might still get a nomination, but I don't see it happening. So that's Dog Day Afternoon. Last up on the list is Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman. Sorry, if you're watching this on YouTube, the sun is shining brightly, and so there's a bit of a glare, but you can see it right there. Death of a Salesman, baby. Death of a Salesman. This is our second revival of it post-COVID, let alone our third revival of it this century and our fourth revival of it in the last 30 years. So that tells you a little bit about something about Death of a Salesman. It is, while Angels in America is my favorite play, and definitely my favorite American play, Death of a Salesman is objectively the greatest American play. The strength of it, its endurance to last over decades, if its relevance, no matter the time that it's being performed in, the depth of human tragedy within all of its characters, that is just a 3-course meal for actors, makes this a piece that will always be done and makes everyone salivate to get their hands on to do, which also can make it super overexposed, as was the narrative when they announced this revival. We just had one. Do we really need it again? Who needs to see Death of a Salesman again? And plus, they're in the Winter Garden Theater, which, much as I love that theater, that is not really a theater for plays. Good Night and Good Luck died in there. While I really enjoyed Wolf Hall, no one went to go see it. And Death of a Salesman is ultimately an intimate show. It's a kitchen sink drama, but also a memory piece. It's like half A View from the Bridge, half The Glass Menagerie. Because if you don't know the piece, it focuses on Willie Loman. He is the salesman in question who is on the mental and moral decline. He worked hard all of his life, was never exceptional, and never really made the right choices, but not out of villainous reasons, out of trying to do his best and ultimately kind of being unlucky over and over and over again. And he's not perfect. He was stubborn. He was definitely egotistical and unwilling to face facts about himself, about his family. But he wasn't a terrible man, and he did not deserve to be discarded in the way that the world was discarding him. This is the famous speech that his wife Linda, played by Laurie Metcalf here, says to their sons Biff and Happy in the kitchen towards the end of Act 1, that attention must be paid. You are to, your father is a good man, he's a hardworking man, and what's happening to him is a tragedy, and attention must be paid. You especially hear how Nathan Lane is playing Willie Loman, and no one really associates Nathan Lane with a role like this. This is a role that Brian Dennehy has played, a role that Philip Seymour Hoffman has played, Dustin Hoffman, George C. Scott. And Nathan Lane doesn't really fit into any of those kinds of men. But I will say, for me, this production very much earns its right to exist, which is a weird thing to say. But considering how this is our second production post-COVID and a play that tends to be rather overexposed, it's easy for all of us to go, oh God, we don't need to see this. But it absolutely justifies happening, even if Scott Rudin is producing it. I don't think it's perfect. I do have my bumps with it. And I would like to see it again to see how certain things have gelled since the last time I saw it. Oh, also, by the way, while I was there after the show, I got spotted by 2 listeners. I didn't catch your guys' names, but 2 gentlemen who came up to me and my father and my grandmother after the show and said, oh, we listened to the podcast. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for listening. It was a highlight of the evening for my father. Much as he enjoyed the play, he loved the fact that I got spotted. I guess I'm not the least famous podcaster anymore. Maybe just the second least famous. Who knows? I'll always be behind Mickey Joe, though, let's be honest. But I'll start with my positives on this first, of what makes this worth seeing. This might be the most directory that Joe Mantello has been in a long time, probably since Assassins. This is a production that reminds you, oh, Joe Mantello directed Love, Valor, Compassion. Because Joe Mantello has had a reputation for the last 20 or so years as being an actor's director. He's not flashy, he's not show-offy, he's text first, he's actor first, and it's about getting performances that are so in sync with the text and so in sync with each other that everything just feels organic and easy and lived in. And he's often lost Best Director of the Tonys for flashier stagings. Ironically, his like real like sort of shot out of the cannon on Broadway Tony debut as a director, Love, Valor, Compassion, was like extremely stagey, and he lost for that production. But he won for Take Me Out and he won for Assassins, which were far more stagey shows. This is the most stagey he's been since then. This production takes place in what I can only describe as sort of like a post-apocalyptic garage. And the opening image is the garage door opening and Nathan Lane as Willie Loman driving onto the stage in a full car, the car that we're supposed to have in Ragtime during Wheels of a Dream. She's currently on stage at the Winter Garden in Death of a Salesman, everybody. But that car remains on stage for the entire show until the very end when, spoiler alert, the title of the show happens. The title number happens. Much like Oedipus, the title song happens when the car goes off stage. And what Mantello does with the script that I thought was so fascinating is, for being such a memory piece, I think often productions forget how much of a memory piece it is and how much of the mental decline of Willie we are watching on stage. And Mantello really takes that to heart. There's the line in Grey Gardens. It's very hard to distinguish the line between the past and the present. And that is absolutely something that Mantello grabs a hold of and never lets go. The way that he uses the car as both a metaphor as well as a gateway to Willie's present, back to his past, and Nathan Lane being unable to distinguish which is which. This is also a production where Biff and Happy, for the first time, have actors playing their younger counterparts in traditional shows. Traditional productions of this play, the actors double as their younger selves. And in the last production that starred Wendell Pierce and Sharon Clark, the actors, I felt, had a very hard time being convincing as the younger selves. And so the directors alternative was to have them be so performative that the whole thing felt almost like a vaudeville, which I felt was a very British way of approaching such an American piece because it was a British director. But Mantello, by having that the roles split, while it's less of a showcase for the actors playing Biff and Happy, it reminds you just how far away we are from what was and how much time has passed since opportunity was at the Loman's door. And it allows Mantello physical opportunities to stage of the ghosts of who Biff and Happy were and who Willie still sees when he talks to his sons today, as well as, their neighbor Eugene and everyone in their lives, right? The thing about the play that always has been kind of tricky, and the last revival's answer to this was casting Andre de Shields, was Willie has an older brother, Ben, a much older brother, Ben, who went off into the jungle, famously went off into the jungle and came out rich and doesn't, and only saw Willie once in Willie's adult life, came to visit and meet Biff and Happy and Linda, and offered Willie an opportunity to go out to Alaska and be a part of a new company that he was developing. And Willie ended up saying no to it, and the company did well, and Willie would have done well, and he would have had a good life without having the tumultuous career of being a traveling salesman, having to go out all the time on the road and sell things to people that they don't need or do not want. And it's a major regret of his. And the role of Ben is a falsehood memory, because Ben exists and him coming happened. But how it happened and how Ben actually was is up for debate. We know that he came, we know that he offered the job, we know that Willie didn't take it. We don't really know how Ben really was. We just see how Willie sees Ben. And in the last production, they had Andre de Shields basically play him like Hermes in Hades Town. Straight out of a dream, coming out of puffs of smoke. And Jonathan Kent plays Ben in this production. And no, not Jonathan Kent, it's Jonathan Jonathan Cake. I apologize, everybody. But you know what I mean. Jonathan Cake plays Ben in this production. And the way that he and Mantello sort of approach it is, his Ben is very real, but he's also very austere. And there's a glow of the odd about him. And you definitely get the sense that you're watching a person who existed through a filter. So what we're seeing is almost like an AI projection simulation of a reality. And that gives it the creepy factor that I think the role has always meant to have, that hasn't always been successfully done in past productions. And part of that is also the abstract desolation of the design of the show and the way that Mantello uses the car, the office door at the back of the stage for entrances and exits, the way that they use lighting and sound to really kind of create this fluidity in the staging in the way that memory is fluid, right? Say what you will about Rowling. The one thing I do appreciate about Harry Potter is the pensive element of the idea of your memories coming out of your head, and they are a liquid that then go into a bowl. Because memory is never solid. It's a liquid. It's a gas. It's flowing in. They're all flowing in and out of each other. It's why you can't totally trust your memory exactly. It's why we ask other people to corroborate with us what happened. Unless you write it down. It's why people also have diaries, because you want to write it down immediately after it happened so you can remember it exactly as it happened. And that is something that I think this production has a great deal of fun with. There's a bunch of wonderful acting happening with some caveats. And again, this is why I want to go back at some point to see sort of how things gel. At the tippity-toppity of all this, we have Nathan Lane, who, on one hand, does all the things you need your Willy Loman to do. He checks all of the boxes acting-wise. And yet, I still did not totally buy his performance, because ultimately I do think it's a role that doesn't fit him. Again, I would like to go back and see with more time if possibly it has fit him more. But at my performance, I definitely felt that there were things about Lane that he can't really change. Not like his stature, but his speaking voice and the way that when he combusts as an actor, it goes into a slightly campy territory, which works in someone like Roy Cohn, who was campy while also, incredibly scary. Willie is more of a devastating character. He's far more tragic, and there's less of the camp of him. It's more of the human, grounded, earthbound to him. And I got the exhaustion, I got the fear, and I got the um arrested development of Willie and his stubbornness and his unwillingness to see how he had failed his sons, how his sons had failed themselves, and the lack of potential that was there anymore, if there ever really was potential there. You see all of this, and yet for me, there was always like one dial was slightly off. So it's not a bad performance. It's a very good performance and all the right intentions. And yet sometimes it's one of those things where you can't really break out of things that don't fit you. I would like to go back and see how that's a little bit different. In a similar and yet different way, Laurie Metcalf as Linda. Linda has always been known as a very warm and very sad presence. Those are things that Laurie Metcalf does not do. Laurie Metcalf cannot do doormat. Laurie Metcalf cannot do quiet, struggling in silence wife to a man. She's incapable of doing that. Laurie Metcalf is a strong, bold, fierce presence, and she brings that to Linda. Her Linda has no time for the bullshit of her two sons. But she ultimately, and you see how this woman who is so powerful and so strong and so smart, but you also see the love and care she has for her husband, and you see how those two blend. And it's very well done. It's a really fascinating portrayal of the role in a way that I don't think anyone's ever done before, where it kind of bumps up for me against the wall is in Act 2 when things take a turn for the Greek tragedy of it all. And granted, we are on a large stage at a large scale for a large house. I did not think that Metcalf had fully figured out how to take that to a scale that didn't seem overly shouty, you know? And again, this is something where you want to go back and see how things keep progressing, because I'm sure like by the end of the run of this, she and Lane will be absolutely zoned in and will be impeccable. But at the time that I saw it, these were things that were kind of still being figured out between the two of them. Of the two sons, we have Ben Ayers. Is that how you say his last name? Clocktwink from Ben Allers from Gilded Age. Speaking of Clocktwink, I do think that I have a theory that he does not like that term, because the first hour of the show he is shirtless and very much buffing himself up, and I'm like, oh, he wants to kill Clocktwink and long live the Clocktwink. Long live the Clocktwunk, I suppose. He and Christopher Abbott as Biff. What Mantello also does is he moves the setting from the 1940s to unclear if it's the 1960s, 70s, if it's present day. I personally was getting more a present day vibe when I saw it, but it's been more confirmed that it's now taking place in the mid to late 60s. And because of this, certain aesthetics and certain attitudes of characters change with it. Most importantly, Biff and Happy. The way that Abbott and Allers have been directed and the way that they're approaching it themselves is sort of like Brooklyn bros. So chains around the neck, muscle tees, which means there's a bit more of a mush mouth masculinity about their performances, which they land. But in the case of Abbott's Biff, for me, made him a very distanced and cold and just uncareable character. Allers is Happy is able to contrast that with a bit more of a comedic edge, which the production desperately needs, and it's a welcome presence. But Abbott's Biff is supposed to be a bleeding heart in this piece. And because of the way that Biff and Happy are approached in this production, that doesn't allow Abbott to get there, at least not for Act 1. By the time everything comes to a head at the end of the show and Abbott's Biff pleads his emotional case to Willie at the end, Abbott gives it everything, and yet I didn't buy it because I did not find that the production led up to that. Now, it worked for other people. Many people have spoken to how they'll never forget that final scene with Abbott, and that's going to be what wins him the Tony for this show. And maybe it's true, and maybe that is something that got figured out ever since I saw it. But when I did see it, I found those two moments disconnected. And by those two moments, I mean the first 80% of the play and then the last 20%. It was sort of, it was just a switch rather than a build-up. And I did not see any of that happening with him earlier in the show. I found him to be rather stiff. And part of that is just the attitude that this production has on these two characters. That said, the rest of the supporting company is fantastic. Tens, tens, tens across the board. We have K. Todd Freeman, who once again brings it to every ball. The role is not the largest of roles, but he is absolutely fantastic in it. Michael Benjamin Washington, also a little underutilized, but has one, two really great scenes in the piece. John Drea does really well in this. It's a really, really strong company overall, even with my reservations on Abbott in the first half, if with my reservations on Metcalf in the second half, and my slight ding on Lane throughout. It is overall so intelligently and emotionally done for the most part, and such a different production of Salesman that you've seen that it really compels you to go to tell people to go see it. Because not only is Salesman, it is a very strong production, and it reminds you how phenomenal of a play this is, and is sort of like exhibit A to anyone who doubts you. And so you want to send people to the Winter Garden who say, "Oh, Salesman, that's a creaky old 1940s Miller play." It's like, no, go fucking see it. And if this production does not make you appreciate how fantastic this play is, then we kind of have nothing else to discuss when it comes to drama, if you will. But the question you're all asking is, Tonys, what's going to happen with the Tonys? I think this has usurped Oedipus as the frontrunner for revival. I really do. Partly because it's still running. If Oedipus were running right now, I think it would be more of a battle. But at the moment, I think this is the frontrunner, especially because I now think that Joe Mantello has jumped straight up as the frontrunner for director of a play. And as I said with Jellicle Ball, it's really difficult to vote for a director for a revival and then not vote for the revival itself. It's really difficult. So I think those two are hand in hand. I think Lane and Metcalf are absolute lock for nominations. Christopher Abbott probably is going to get nominated. Biff tends to get nominated. Featured actor in a play this year is it's both a wide open field and a crowded category. And so any combination of actors could get in there. I think I found Ben Allers as happy to be the more successful of the performances. I would nominate him over Abbott, but Abbott has the better role and has the final moments that really make you walk away with thinking about him. For most people, I would say. I guess the other thing I'll say is I found that Metcalf wasn't able to fully land the final monologue of Linda, the "I can't cry" monologue. But listen, I'm sure that at this point she fully has it locked in. It just wasn't there when I saw it. But I do think that she and Lane are locks for nominations. Metcalf could win. Probably will, I would imagine. But I think she could win. Abbott could get nominated. Allers could get nominated. Revival and director locks, favorites to win. I think that they also have I think they're locks for nominations for sound and lighting. Probably favorites to win in those categories too. I could imagine them getting in for set design too. It's a big set design, but it's a big and sparse set design. So it's not like it's as elaborate as, say, Dog Day Afternoon, but because of how it's designed, it is so supportive of the production it's housing that is what gives it the edge over something like A Dog Day Afternoon, especially if we're talking about for a win. So that would be my thoughts on Salesman for Tony chances. So yeah, once again, that is us for Giant. That is us for Dog Day Afternoon, and that is us for Death of a Salesman. I will reveal more about where they rank in my overall rankings of the season in a few episodes. But yeah, that's it for this episode, guys. Make sure that you have your tickets for May 3rd, Broadway Breakdown, reviewing the 2025-2026 season. And then you've joined the Discord so you can talk more about your feelings about these reviews or where things are heading with the Tonys with other listeners of the podcast. You can also join the Substack. We're going to start having more written content soon enough. You can follow me on Instagram at Macoplik, usual spelling. You can do a nice 5-star rating or review. And yeah, I'm trying to think who I want us to close out with today. You know what? John Lithgow his last Broadway musical was Dirty Round Scoundrels. And now we've done Sherry Renee Scott, but it's been a while since we've done Joanna Gleason, if ever. So we're going to close out today with Joanna Gleason. Okay, that's it. I will see you guys shortly for the next review. Yeah, have a good one. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Take it away, Joanna. Bye.
Only 3 more tries and we'll have our prize.